In a social media post earlier this year, President Trump threatened tariffs and sanctions against Mexico, claiming the country violated a 1944 treaty and is stealing water from Texas farmers. It's part of a long-running dispute over shared water in the Rio Grande River, a dispute that scientists say is made worse by higher temperatures, extreme weather, and a greater demand for water. Stephanie Sy reports from Texas for our series on the impact of climate change, Tipping Point.
From Texas State Highway 107 in Santa Rosa, the Rio Grande Valley sugar mill strikes an imposing figure.
We're in the sugar warehouse. Sugar would fill this entire warehouse as it's being processed.
But it's sat empty since the mill closed its doors last year.
We started disassembly pretty much almost immediately.
Tudor Yulhorn is a former sugarcane grower and the mill's last chairman of the board.
I don't come out here like I used to with pride that I'm a sugar grower. I come out here and it's sad to see that this whole industry is gone now. Symbolically, it is a reflection of nobody cares about us in the Rio Grande Valley.
The closure of Texas's last sugar mill, which once employed 500 people and processed about 160,000 tons of raw sugar annually, coincided with years of increasing water scarcity in the region. The Rio Grande Valley is one of the few places in the U.S. where sugarcane will grow, but it takes a lot of water.
Farmers are plowing out cane because no one has any irrigation water. We just got completely choked off by Mexico's failure to deliver the water.
That water is owed to farmers here in the Rio Grande Valley as part of a more than 80-year-old treaty that requires Mexico to share some of the water that winds through its land. Signed in 1944, the treaty establishes that the U.S. will release a minimum of nearly 500 billion gallons of water from the Colorado River to Mexico annually, providing water for agriculture in the Mexicali Valley and drinking water for large cities like Tijuana. In return, Mexico will release a minimum of 114 billion gallons of water from the Rio Conchos and other tributaries to the Rio Grande annually, providing water for farmers and residents in the Rio Grande Valley. The treaty stipulates that any water debt should carry over to the next 5-year cycle in times of extraordinary drought. But critics say drought is not the only reason Mexico hasn't upheld its end of the bargain.
Mexico is capturing the water that used to flow freely into the Rio Grande.
Sonny Hinojosa is a former water district general manager in Hidalgo County, Texas.
Since the treaty was signed in 1944, these other 8 additional reservoirs were constructed.
He says Mexico's construction of additional reservoirs has allowed them to keep more of the water before it flows to Texas. They've fallen short of their obligations to the U.S. 5 times since the 1990s. Even when a tropical storm filled Mexico's reservoirs with over 700 billion gallons of water in 2022.
Mexico didn't release any of that water to comply with the terms of the treaty for the next couple of years.
The current 5-year delivery cycle ends in October, but so far, Mexico has released less than 40% of what it owes.
Our farmers will once again be faced with shortages. They either don't plant or they plant reduced acreage. That's just the way it is.
Across the southern border, the dependence on the Rio Grande's main tributary, the Rio Conchos, has led to desperation. Drought has brought this community in the state of Chihuahua out to a lakeside mass. They pray for rain.
The situation is very critical, so we need to ask God to send us the rain. That's the only solution we have for everything.
For 30 years, Rafael Betance has been measuring the La Boquilla Dam, which stores water from the Rio Conchos. He says the terms of the 80-year-old treaty are impossible to fulfill these days.
The commitments they made were when there were surpluses of the dams, when it spilled over, when it rained a lot. Right now, where do we give them water from? It hasn't rained for 2 or 3 years. That's the problem.
The scarcity of water isn't merely due to a lack of rain. Farms in the region have significantly expanded their acreage in the last few years, and aging irrigation infrastructure means farmers there are wasting water. Miles from the dam, farmer Fidel Hidalgo Terrano waters his 5-acre walnut grove for the first time in a month and a half by flooding the field, one of the least efficient irrigation techniques.
I think all of us, those of us who farm, are aware that we are wasting a lot of water. If there were another watering system, a sprinkler irrigation system or belt system, it takes a lot of money, and it's expensive per hectare.
Chihuahua is a major producer of walnuts, a water-intensive crop that demands even more irrigation on hotter, drier days.
It has gotten hotter. The annual average temperature has increased by almost 3 degrees. The average annual number of days over 100 has increased 5-fold since 1950.
Alex Ricelis is an environmental scientist at the University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley. He says the impacts of climate change, higher temperatures coupled with less predictable rains, have strained water resources, as has an increase in demand.
The U.S. population has increased by 3 times since 1940, and Mexico by 7 times. So you just have a ton of users, less consistent input of water, which makes it very contentious.
Ricelis works directly with local farmers in the Rio Grande Valley to adapt to a new climate reality, one with less water.
When you look at climate change predictions where it's only predicted to get hotter and that the periods of drought are predicted to get even more prolonged, and you combine that with the fact that the population is expected to increase, it's pretty grim for agriculture.
At Hub of Prosperity, a small off-campus farm operated by the University of Texas Rio Grande Valley, he demonstrates water-efficient farming techniques and promotes a variety of vegetables that can grow in a hotter climate.
Farmers are very resilient, they're very innovative, they're coming up with their own techniques that we're helping them, explore.
That across the street was an orchard. We were starting to hit that uncertainty of water.
For most of his life, Dale Murden has been a citrus grower. He's also president of Texas Citrus Mutual, representing hundreds of other farmers in the state.
This is really not what you want a grove to look like.
The rough shape of this grapefruit grove illustrates the difficult choices growers are having to make in an era of scarcity.
This grove should have already been watered a couple of times this year, and we probably should have had at least two waterings more on this than has, but that's where we're at with limited supply of water or no water. And so you kind of tend to let things go like weed control.
Murden watched as the sugarcane industry in the Rio Grande Valley folded, wondering if citrus was next.
What does the future hold? If I can't even count on my neighbor giving me the annual payment like we do on the Colorado side, man, it renders me really, really incapable of the ability to plan for long range.
Calls from Texas lawmakers to force Mexico to deliver water more reliably have been echoed by the president. In April, Trump raised the prospect of escalating tariffs and possible sanctions, quote, until Mexico honors the treaty. In response, Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum acknowledged her country's shortcomings and released roughly 18 billion gallons of water.
It's definitely on this administration's radar for whatever reason. There's chips in every trade negotiation. If I'm being used as a chip, so be it. At least we're getting the attention.
But the attention may be too little too late. That's certainly the case for Texas's sugarcane industry, the first, but likely not the last casualty of this water battle. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Stephanie Tsai in the Rio Grande Valley.